behind the golden gates of Buckingham Palace, where centuries of tradition meet modern reality, something extraordinary happened in 2023 that nobody saw coming. While the world watched for scandal and controversy, a quiet revolution was taking place in the corridors of power. It wasn't about crowns or ceremonies, politics or protocol. It was about something far more precious and rare in royal circles, genuine human moments that reminded the world why monarchy still matters in the 21st century. This is the untold story of how a year that began with uncertainty became a masterclass in resilience, joy, and the enduring power of duty served with a smile. From secret garden parties that broke decades of tradition to spontaneous acts of kindness that went viral across the globe, these are the moments that proved even in the most formal institution on earth, authentic humanity always finds a way to shine through. What you're about to discover will change how you see the royal family forever. Because sometimes, the most powerful crown a person can wear is simply a genuine smile. The morning of January 15, 2023, began like any other winter day at Windsor Castle. Frost covered the ancient stones, and the early morning mist hung low over the great park. Lady Catherine Pemberton, the newly appointed Deputy Private Secretary to the Prince and Princess of Wales, was reviewing the day's schedule when her phone buzzed with an urgent message that would set in motion a year of unprecedented royal moments. The message was from William himself, sent at 6:47 a.m. It contained just 4 words that would later be remembered as the spark that ignited a revolution in royal protocol: "Let's try something different." Catherine had been expecting the usual requests, adjustments to speech timing, questions about guest lists, or concerns about security arrangements. What she wasn't expecting was Prince William's proposal to completely reimagine how the royal family engaged with the public during what everyone knew would be a challenging year ahead. The context was crucial. King Charles had been on the throne for just 4 months, following the passing of Queen Elizabeth II in September 2022. The nation was still processing the enormous transition, and there were whispers in the media about whether the monarchy could maintain its relevance in an increasingly modern world. Traditional royal watchers were calling for more of the same: stately ceremonies, formal appearances, and measured public statements. But William had been quietly observing something different during his travels across the Commonwealth realms in late 2022. In Australia, he had noticed how a spontaneous cricket match with local children had generated more positive coverage than any formal speech he had given. In Canada, when rain had forced the cancellation of an outdoor ceremony, his decision to move the entire event into a local community centre, protocol be damned, had created an intimacy that no amount of pageantry could match. These moments had planted a seed of an idea that would soon blossom into something extraordinary. Catherine found William in the Oak Room, where he was having breakfast with Catherine, the Princess of Wales. The couple was animated in discussion, and it quickly became clear that this wasn't just William's idea, this was a joint vision that had been developing between them for weeks. "We've been thinking about grandfather's approach," William explained, referring to Prince Philip, who had passed away in 2021. "He never stood on ceremony when it came to connecting with people. Remember the stories about him stopping royal processions to pet dogs or chat with workers? We want to capture that spirit, but in our own way." Catherine, the princess, added, "We've spent the last few months asking ourselves a simple question: how do we make the monarchy feel less like a museum exhibit and more like a living, breathing part of people's lives? The answer isn't in grand gestures, it's in the small moments that remind everyone we're human too." The plan they outlined was ambitious in its simplicity. Instead of following the traditional royal calendar of formal events and carefully choreographed appearances, they would spend 2023 seeking out opportunities to create genuine connections. They would still fulfill their constitutional duties, of course, but they would approach each engagement with one guiding principle: authenticity over artifice. Lady Catherine was intrigued but cautious. Years of royal protocol had taught her that spontaneity and monarchy rarely mixed well. Security concerns, media expectations, and constitutional requirements created a complex web of constraints that had shaped royal behavior for generations. But, as William and Catherine outlined their vision, she began to see how carefully planned spontaneity might actually work. The first test case would come sooner than anyone expected. On January 18, just 3 days after that breakfast meeting, William and Catherine were scheduled to visit a children's hospital in Manchester. It was meant to be a standard royal visit, tour the facilities, meet with staff, spend time with young patients, and deliver brief remarks about the importance of pediatric care. The schedule allowed for 90 minutes, with every moment planned down to the minute. But, as their car approached the hospital, Catherine noticed something that wasn't on the itinerary. In the small park across the street, a group of children were having what appeared to be an impromptu football match, using their backpacks as goalposts. Most were wearing Manchester United jerseys, and their laughter could be heard even through the car windows. "Pull over," William told their protection officer. "Sir, we're expected at the hospital in 10 minutes, came the reply. "The hospital will wait," Catherine said, already reaching for the door handle. "This won't take long." What happened next would be replayed on news broadcasts around the world for weeks to come. William and Catherine crossed the street and simply joined the football match. There were no security cordons, no formal introductions, no speeches. William took off his coat and joined one team while Catherine, despite wearing a cream-colored coat that probably cost more than most cars, became an enthusiastic goalkeeper for the other side. For 25 minutes, the Prince and Princess of Wales played football in a Manchester park with a group of children who had been skipping school. When one of the boys finally recognized them, his jaw dropped so dramatically that it started a chain reaction of recognition. But, instead of the usual formality that accompanied royal encounters, something magical happened. The children simply kept playing. "Are you really the prince?" asked 8-year-old Marcus Thompson, during a brief water break. "I am today," William replied with a grin. "But, right now, I'm just trying not to let your team score." "You're not very good at it," Marcus observed, which sent Catherine into fits of laughter. The hospital visit that followed was transformed by what had just happened in the park. The children they met were bubbling with excitement, not because they were meeting royalty, but because they were meeting the adults who had just proven that grown-ups could still be fun. The staff noticed it too. There was an ease in William and Catherine's interactions that felt refreshingly natural. Dr. Sarah Chan, the hospital's head of pediatrics, later described the visit as unlike any royal encounter she had witnessed in 20 years of medicine. Usually, these visits feel a bit like watching actors perform a play. Everyone knows their lines, everyone hits their marks. But this felt real. The prince and princess weren't performing roles, they were just being themselves. The media response was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. The images of Catherine diving to make a save while wearing a designer coat became instant classics. William's concentrated expression as he lined up a shot was turned into countless memes. But, more importantly, the coverage focused on something that had been missing from royal reporting for years: joy. The success of the Manchester visit convinced William and Catherine that they were onto something significant. But, it also raised important questions. How often could they break protocol before it stopped being special? How could they balance spontaneity with the security and logistical requirements that came with their positions? And, perhaps most importantly, how could they ensure that their approach didn't overshadow the serious work they were trying to accomplish? The answers would come through trial and error over the following weeks. They learned that the key was preparation. Their team began building flexibility into every official schedule, identifying opportunities where spontaneous detours might be possible. They established code words that would signal their security detail when they wanted to make an unscheduled stop. They even started carrying casual shoes in their car, learning from Catherine's experience of playing football in heels. But the real breakthrough came when they realized that their new approach wasn't just about creating memorable moments for the public, it was changing how they experienced their own royal duties. The formality and distance that had traditionally defined royal engagements had often left them feeling like performers rather than participants. This new authenticity was energizing them in unexpected ways. "For the first time in years, I'm excited about our schedule," Catherine confided to Lady Catherine during a planning meeting in February. "We're not just checking boxes anymore, we're actually connecting with people." The ripple effects extended beyond William and Catherine themselves. King Charles, initially cautious about his son's departure from established protocol, found himself inspired by the positive response. Other members of the royal family began incorporating elements of this more relaxed approach into their own engagements. Even the traditionally formal trooping the color ceremony was quietly adjusted to allow for more interaction between the royal family and the gathered crowds. By March, what had started as a simple desire to try something different had evolved into a comprehensive reimagining of royal engagement. The formal name for this approach never appeared in any official documents, but palace insiders began referring to it as the Smile Initiative, a recognition that genuine joy had become the royal family's most powerful diplomatic tool. The transformation wasn't limited to public appearances. William and Catherine began hosting smaller, more intimate gatherings at Kensington Palace. Instead of formal state dinners with predetermined guest lists, they organized casual suppers where fascinating people from different walks of life could meet and share ideas. A Nobel Prize-winning scientist might find herself seated next to a young entrepreneur from East London, while a celebrated author engaged in passionate conversation with a community organizer from Wales. These gatherings became legendary among those fortunate enough to attend them. The conversations were deeper, the connections more meaningful, and the atmosphere entirely different from traditional royal entertaining. Guests frequently commented that they forgot they were in a palace until they saw the portraits of former monarchs on the walls. Lady Catherine Pemberton, who had initially worried about the practical implications of William and Catherine's new approach, found herself becoming one of its most effective advocates. The positive media coverage was undeniable, but, more importantly, she could see the impact on the communities they visited. Follow-up reports consistently showed increased engagement with the charities and causes they had highlighted, and public approval ratings for the monarchy were reaching heights not seen since the early years of Queen Elizabeth II's reign. The success was not without its challenges. Conservative voices within the establishment worried about maintaining the dignity of the crown. There were concerns about security implications when schedules became more flexible. Some traditionalists argued that the monarchy's power came from its mystique, and that too much accessibility might diminish its authority. But, as spring approached and the first quarter of 2023 drew to a close, it became clear that something special was happening. The royal family wasn't losing its relevance, it was rediscovering it. And, at the center of this transformation were two people who had decided that being royal didn't mean being remote, that duty could be joyful, and that sometimes the most profound act of service was simply sharing a smile. The cherry blossoms were in full bloom around Kensington Palace when Princess Charlotte made an observation that would reshape the royal family's approach to one of their most sacred traditions. It was April 3, 2023, and the 7-year-old was having breakfast with her parents when she asked a question that seemed innocent enough but would prove revolutionary. "Mummy, why don't we ever have birthday parties like my friends do?" Catherine paused, her coffee cup halfway to her lips. Charlotte's birthday was approaching, and, like every royal birthday before it, the celebration would consist of official photographs, formal well wishes from various dignitaries, and perhaps a small family gathering behind closed doors. The idea of a normal birthday party, with games, decorations, and friends running around, had never been considered. William set down his newspaper and looked at his daughter thoughtfully. "What kind of birthday party would you want, Charlotte?" The conversation that followed would become known within palace circles as the Charlotte moment, a child's simple question that illuminated how far removed royal traditions had become from the experiences of ordinary families. Charlotte's wish list was remarkably modest. She wanted to invite her school friends, play musical chairs, and have a chocolate cake with candles she could blow out herself. But, what about the photographers? Catherine asked, thinking through the logistics. "What about them?" William replied. "Maybe it's time they saw something real for once." The decision to host Charlotte's 9th birthday party as a genuinely child-centered celebration, rather than a formal royal event, marked a turning point in the royal family's year of transformation. But, the implications went far beyond one little girl's special day. It represented a fundamental shift in how the monarchy approached the balance between public duty and private life. Lady Catherine Pemberton spent the next 2 weeks coordinating what would become known as the most logistically complex children's birthday party in royal history. The guest list included 12 of Charlotte's classmates from Thomas's Battersea, along with their parents. Security arrangements had to accommodate excited children running around palace grounds. And, perhaps most challenging of all, media access had to be carefully managed to ensure the event felt authentic while still respecting the privacy of the non-royal families involved. The party took place in the sunken garden at Kensington Palace, the same location where Princess Diana's memorial had been unveiled just 2 years earlier. The symbolism was intentional. William and Catherine wanted to reclaim the space as a place of joy rather than just remembrance. The garden was transformed with colorful bunting, balloons in Charlotte's favorite shade of purple, and a series of game stations that would have made any party planning company proud. What made the event extraordinary wasn't the royal setting or the impeccable organization, it was watching Prince William attempt to facilitate a game of musical chairs for a group of 9-year-olds who were far more interested in his efforts than impressed by his title. When the music stopped and William found himself without a seat, the children erupted in giggles as the future King of England gracefully accepted his elimination. Charlotte's friend Emma Patterson later told her mother, "I forgot Prince William was a prince until I saw him sitting on the ground after he got out. He's just really funny." Catherine proved equally willing to abandon royal dignity in service of childhood joy. She spent 20 minutes helping children make friendship bracelets, got thoroughly defeated in a 3-legged race, and somehow managed to keep her composure when 10-year-old Oliver Hughes accidentally launched a water balloon that soaked her designer dress. "Your Highness, I'm so sorry," Oliver's mother gasped, rushing forward with napkins. "Don't you dare apologize," Catherine laughed, wringing out her sleeve. "This is the most fun I've had at a party in years." The moment that captured hearts around the world came during the cake ceremony. Instead of the usual formal presentation, Charlotte's chocolate cake was brought out on a simple trolley, complete with slightly crooked purple icing and 9 candles that took 3 attempts to light properly due to an afternoon breeze. As Charlotte prepared to blow out the candles, her younger brother Prince Louis shouted, "Make a wish for everyone." Charlotte closed her eyes tight, took a deep breath, and then looked up at the gathered crowd of family and friends. "I wish that everyone could be this happy all the time," she announced, before blowing out the candles with gusto. The photographs from Charlotte's party told a story that formal royal portraits never could. Here was a royal family that wasn't performing royalty, they were simply being a family. William's shirt was untucked from chasing children around the garden. Catherine had grass stains on her knees from helping set up a treasure hunt. King Charles, who had stopped by to wish his granddaughter happy birthday, was captured mid-laugh as Charlotte presented him with a handmade crown crafted from paper plates and sequins. The media response was unlike anything royal correspondents had experienced in their careers. Instead of analyzing protocol or speculating about underlying tensions, journalists found themselves writing about genuine moments of human connection. The story wasn't about what the royal family represented, it was about who they actually were when the formal masks came off. Rebecca Morrison, royal correspondent for The Times, wrote, "In 40 years of covering the royal family, I have never seen photographs that felt so unguarded and real. These aren't staged portraits designed to convey a message about monarchy, they're family photos that happen to include people who wear crowns." The success of Charlotte's party emboldened the royal family to reconsider other long-standing traditions. When Prince Louis's birthday arrived a few weeks later, instead of formal celebrations, he requested a picnic in Hyde Park. The sight of the 5-year-old prince feeding ducks while his grandfather, the King of England, patiently helped him count pieces of bread became an instant classic. But perhaps the most significant impact of Charlotte's party wasn't on public perception, it was on the royal family themselves. For the first time in recent memory, they had experienced what it felt like to host an event purely for the joy of it, without the weight of centuries of protocol and expectation. "I'd forgotten what it was like to laugh without thinking about how the laughter would be interpreted," Catherine confided to her private secretary a few days later. "Charlotte reminded us that sometimes celebration doesn't need a deeper purpose, sometimes it's enough just to be happy." This revelation influenced how they approached the next major event on the royal calendar, the May Bank Holiday weekend, which traditionally featured the formal celebration of various royal patronages and charities. Instead of the usual series of separate, formal events, William and Catherine proposed something unprecedented, a 3-day festival in Windsor Great Park that would bring together all their charitable causes in one massive celebration of community service. The Festival of Service was announced with just 6 weeks' notice, sending palace event coordinators into a controlled panic. Traditional royal planning operated on timescales measured in months or years, not weeks. But the urgency was intentional. William and Catherine wanted to capture the spontaneous energy that had made Charlotte's party so successful. The festival's organizing principle was revolutionary in its simplicity. Instead of the royal family being presented to the public, they would work alongside the public. Each day would feature hands-on volunteer opportunities where members of the royal family would participate as equal partners rather than ceremonial figureheads. Day 1 focused on environmental conservation. Prince William arrived at 7 a.m. in work clothes and spent the morning planting trees alongside volunteers from local conservation groups. There were no speeches, no formal presentations, just the future King of England with dirt under his fingernails, learning about soil composition from a teenager who was part of a youth environmental program. Catherine spent the same morning working with a team to build raised garden beds for a community food initiative. When she struggled to properly install a difficult corner joint, retired carpenter Frank Williams, 73, patiently showed her the correct technique. "She's a quick learner," Frank told reporters afterward. "Good with her hands. Could probably make a decent carpenter if this royal business doesn't work out." Day 2 centered on education and youth development. Instead of touring schools and observing classes, William and Catherine became temporary teaching assistants in various programs throughout Windsor. William found himself helping 8-year-olds with their math homework while Catherine read stories to preschoolers. The sight of the Princess of Wales sitting cross-legged on a carpet, using different voices for characters in a story about a brave little rabbit, reminded everyone present why she had been such an effective early years advocate. The third day was dedicated to community support services. William volunteered at a local food bank, learning the logistics of food distribution while Catherine worked with a team preparing meals for isolated elderly residents. The work was physically demanding and emotionally challenging, but both threw themselves into it with genuine enthusiasm. The Festival of Service attracted over 50,000 visitors across the 3 days, but what made it remarkable wasn't the attendance figures, it was the atmosphere. This wasn't a performance being given for the public's benefit, it was a genuine celebration of community spirit in which the royal family participated as equals rather than elevated observers. Dr. James Hartley, a sociology professor at Oxford who studied public engagement with the monarchy, later described the festival as a watershed moment. For centuries, royal events have been about subjects coming to pay homage to their monarchs. This was the first time I've seen royalty come to serve their subjects in such a direct, unmediated way. The festival's impact extended far beyond the 3 days themselves. Volunteer applications for every charity involved spiked dramatically in the following weeks. Local community organizations reported increased donations and engagement. Most significantly, the model was quickly adopted by other royal households across Europe, with the Crown Princess of Sweden and the Crown Prince of Norway organizing similar festivals in their own countries. But the true measure of the festival's success came in an unexpected form. On the final evening, as cleanup crews worked to restore Windsor Great Park to its usual pristine condition, a group of volunteers began singing Happy Birthday to Charlotte, whose actual birthday had fallen during the festival. Soon, thousands of voices joined in, creating an impromptu celebration that no amount of planning could have orchestrated. Standing in the middle of that crowd, surrounded by people who had spent 3 days working together for the common good, William and Catherine experienced something that traditional royal events had never provided: a sense of genuine connection with the people they would one day serve as king and queen. "This is what monarchy should feel like," William told Catherine as they listened to the singing. "Not distant and formal, but part of the fabric of community life." As spring turned to summer, the success of these initiatives created momentum for even more ambitious plans. The traditional summer royal calendar would typically feature a series of garden parties, polo matches, and formal receptions. But William and Catherine had developed a taste for something more meaningful than social ritual. The letter arrived at Kensington Palace on June 12, 2023, written in shaky handwriting on lined paper clearly torn from a school notebook. It was addressed simply to Princess Catherine and had somehow made it through layers of royal mail screening to land on Lady Catherine Pemberton's desk on a humid Tuesday morning. The letter was from 10-year-old Amira Hassan, a refugee from Somalia who had recently started attending primary school in Birmingham. Her English was still developing, but her message was crystal clear. She wanted to invite Princess Catherine to her school's summer fair because you seem like you would like the cake stall and you make people smile. Under normal circumstances, such invitations were politely declined through form letters that thanked the sender while explaining the impossibility of accommodating every request. The royal family received thousands of similar invitations each year, and accepting even a fraction of them would be logistically impossible. But these were no longer normal circumstances, and this letter arrived at exactly the right moment. William and Catherine had spent the morning discussing their summer schedule with their private secretary, expressing frustration with the traditional royal summer circuit. Garden parties at Buckingham Palace, while beautifully orchestrated, felt increasingly disconnected from the energy they had discovered in their more spontaneous engagements. The Wimbledon appearances, polo matches, and formal receptions that filled the summer months served important diplomatic and social functions, but left little room for the authentic connections that had become their passion. "What if we tried something completely different this summer?" Catherine had mused during their planning meeting. "What if instead of people coming to us, we went to where we could actually make a difference?" Amira's letter felt like a sign. Birmingham was a 2-hour drive from London. The school's summer fair was scheduled for the following Saturday. There were no security concerns that couldn't be managed, no diplomatic implications to consider, and no constitutional duties that would be compromised. Most importantly, there was an opportunity to bring joy to a community that rarely saw royal visitors. "Book it," Catherine told Lady Catherine Pemberton after reading Amira's letter for the third time. "And don't announce it. Let's just show up." The decision to make an unannounced visit to Amira's school fair represented a new level of spontaneity in the royal family's approach to public engagement. Previous surprise visits had always been carefully planned, with advance teams, security sweeps, and media coordination. This would be different, truly spontaneous, with only minimal advance preparation to ensure basic safety requirements were met. The Greenfield Primary School Summer Fair was exactly what its name suggested, a modest community event held on the school's playground in Small Field, featuring handmade crafts, children's games, and refreshments prepared by volunteers. It was the kind of event that happened in communities across Britain every weekend during the summer months, usually attracting 50 to 60 families from the local area. Catherine arrived at 2 p.m. driving herself in a modest car, accompanied only by a single protection officer who remained discreetly in the background. She wore jeans, trainers, and a simple blue shirt, an outfit that would have been unthinkable at a formal royal engagement but was perfect for navigating hay bales and grass stains. The first person to recognize her was Mrs. Sarah Thompson, who was running the tombola stall and nearly dropped her roll of raffle tickets when she looked up to see the future Queen of England asking about the prizes. "I'm sorry, but are you?" Mrs. Thompson stammered. "I'm Catherine," came the reply with a warm smile. "Amira Hassan invited me, and I couldn't resist coming to see what all the fuss was about." Word spread quickly but quietly through the fair. There was no dramatic announcement, no gathering of crowds, just a gradual recognition that someone special was moving among the stalls, genuinely interested in homemade jam and hand-knitted scarves. The atmosphere remained exactly what it had been before Catherine's arrival, relaxed, friendly, and focused on community rather than celebrity. Amira's reaction when she finally spotted Catherine near the cake stall was pure joy. The 10-year-old had been helping her mother, Fatima, serve slices of traditional Somali cake when she looked up and saw her invitation had been accepted. Instead of the shy nervousness that might have been expected, Amira ran straight to Catherine with the confidence of a child whose gesture of friendship had been honored. "You came!" Amira exclaimed, throwing her arms around Catherine in a hug that would have horrified royal protocol experts but delighted everyone present. "Did you try the cake yet? My mom made it specially." The next 2 hours unfolded with the easy rhythm of a village fair rather than a royal engagement. Catherine helped judge the children's art competition, took her turn in the inflatable obstacle course, finishing third out of 5 participants, and spent considerable time at the bookstall, where she discovered that several titles from her early childhood literacy initiative were raising funds for new playground equipment. But it was her interaction with the Somali community at the fair that created the most lasting impact. Fatima Hassan had been nervous about her daughter's bold invitation to a princess, worried that it might be seen as presumptuous. Instead, she found herself in deep conversation with Catherine about the challenges and joys of raising children in a new country while preserving cultural traditions. "In Somalia, we have a saying," Fatima shared while they watched their children play together. "The first year in a new place, you plant flowers for beauty. The second year, you plant vegetables for sustenance. The third year, you plant trees for your children's future.
I think we are in our tree planting year now.
That's beautiful, Catherine replied.
What kind of trees are you planting?
The conversation that followed touched on education, community integration, and the delicate balance of honoring heritage while embracing new opportunities. It was exactly the kind of dialogue that formal royal visits often missed, unguarded, personal, and genuinely enlightening for both participants. When Catherine finally prepared to leave, she had purchased a hand-knitted scarf, contributed generously to several fundraising efforts, and somehow acquired a small potted plant that 6-year-old Marcus had insisted she needed for her garden. More importantly, she had experienced what she later described as one of the most refreshing afternoons of her entire royal career. The media coverage of the Birmingham visit was extensive but notably different from typical royal reporting. Because there had been no formal announcement, most photographs were taken by parents and community members rather than professional royal photographers. The images that emerged showed Catherine in moments of genuine engagement, laughing with children, listening intently to parents, and looking completely at ease in a setting that bore no resemblance to a palace. The story captured international attention, but not because of royal protocol or constitutional significance. Instead, it resonated because it showed what public service could look like when stripped of ceremony and focused purely on human connection. Editorial writers across Europe hailed it as a new model for modern monarchy, while social media exploded with appreciation for Catherine's genuine approach to community engagement. The Birmingham Fair visit inspired a series of similar unannounced appearances throughout the summer. William joined a pickup football match in a London park after noticing it from his car window. Catherine stopped to help when she saw volunteers struggling to set up chairs for an outdoor concert in a retirement community. These weren't planned media opportunities, they were spontaneous decisions to participate in community life whenever the opportunity arose. The cumulative effect of these informal engagements was remarkable. Public approval ratings for the royal family reached levels not seen since the early 1990s, but, more significantly, the nature of public discourse about monarchy began to shift. Instead of focusing on ceremony, tradition, or constitutional role, conversations increasingly centered on the practical impact of royal engagement with communities. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, a political scientist at Cambridge University, conducted a study of media coverage before and after the Birmingham visit. The language changed completely, she observed.
Royal reporting moved from describing events to describing relationships.
The focus shifted from what the royals were wearing or saying to how they were connecting with people. This shift in public perception created space for even more ambitious initiatives. When August arrived with its traditional royal retreat to Scotland, William and Catherine made an unprecedented decision. Instead of spending the entire month at Balmoral in private family time, they would spend 2 weeks working with communities across Scotland, treating it as an opportunity to deepen their understanding of the challenges facing rural and remote communities. The Scottish summer service began in the Hebrides, where William and Catherine worked with local fishermen to understand the impact of changing ocean conditions on traditional livelihoods. They spent 3 days learning to repair fishing nets, helping with early morning catches, and participating in community discussions about sustainable fishing practices. Catherine proved surprisingly adept at net repair, earning praise from fisherman Donald MacLeod, who had been skeptical about fancy visitors from London but found himself genuinely impressed by her willingness to tackle difficult work. "She's got good hands for detailed work," he told his crew. "And she listens properly when you're trying to explain something technical." The visit to the Highlands focused on conservation and land management. William worked with rangers on red deer population surveys, learning the complex balance between wildlife conservation and agricultural needs. The experience provided him with first-hand knowledge that would prove invaluable in his later work on environmental issues. But it was their time in Glasgow that created the most lasting impact. Instead of formal civic receptions, William and Catherine spent a week working with various community organizations addressing urban challenges. They volunteered at a food bank, helped refurbish a community center, and participated in programs supporting young people transitioning out of the foster care system. The Glasgow week was emotionally challenging in ways that formal royal visits rarely were. Working directly with people facing homelessness, addiction, and social isolation provided stark reminders of the realities that existed alongside the privilege and ceremony of royal life. But, rather than being discouraged by these challenges, William and Catherine found themselves energized by the opportunity to contribute to meaningful solutions. "This is what I want our roles to be about," Catherine told William one evening as they reflected on their day at a youth center. "Not just being symbols or figureheads, but being useful.
Actually being part of the work that needs doing."
Their week in Glasgow concluded with an event that perfectly captured the summer's theme of authentic engagement. Local community leaders had organized a simple barbecue in a public park to thank William and Catherine for their week of service. There were no speeches, no formal protocols, and no media circus, just a community gathering where they could share food and conversation with the people they had been working alongside. As the evening progressed and informal music began, something unexpected happened. Someone started singing "Flower of Scotland," and gradually the entire gathering joined in. William and Catherine, who had learned the words during their week in the city, added their voices to the chorus. Standing in that park, surrounded by people they had come to know as individuals rather than subjects, they experienced the kind of connection that no amount of formal ceremony could create. The summer of 2023 had transformed from a traditional royal season of social events and ceremonial duties into something entirely different, a sustained engagement with communities across Britain that had deepened their understanding of their future roles while creating genuine relationships with the people they would one day serve as king and queen. The first frost of autumn had painted the windows of Kensington Palace when an unusual visitor arrived on September 23, 2023. Professor Elizabeth Hartwell, director of the Centre for Modern Monarchy Studies at Oxford University, had been granted a private audience with William and Catherine, not for the usual academic protocol meeting, but to discuss something far more significant. She came bearing a leather portfolio filled with research that would challenge everything the royal family thought they knew about their impact during the year of transformation. Professor Hartwell's study had been tracking public perception and engagement with the monarchy throughout 2023, but her findings went beyond traditional polling data. She had analyzed social media sentiment, conducted in-depth interviews with communities the royal family had visited, and measured tangible outcomes from their various initiatives. What she discovered was unprecedented in modern royal history. "Your Royal Highnesses," she began, settling into the comfortable chairs of the morning room, "I believe you've accomplished something that hasn't been seen in the British monarchy for over a century. You fundamentally altered the relationship between the crown and the people, and the effects are measurable in ways that surprise even my academic colleagues." The numbers were striking. Charitable giving to organizations associated with royal patronages had increased by 127% since January. Volunteer applications for community service programs had risen by 89% in areas where William and Catherine had made their informal visits. Most remarkably, surveys showed that 78% of respondents could name at least one specific action the royal family had taken to help their community, a level of awareness that traditional royal activities had never achieved. But Professor Hartwell's most significant finding wasn't quantitative, it was qualitative. Through extensive interviews, she had discovered that people's fundamental understanding of what the royal family represented had shifted. Instead of viewing them primarily as symbols of tradition and ceremony, the public increasingly saw them as active participants in community life. "The language people use when talking about you has changed," she explained to William and Catherine. "Instead of saying they visited us or we met them, people say we worked together and they helped us." That shift from passive observation to active partnership represents a revolution in royal engagement. This academic validation of their instinctive approach gave William and Catherine confidence to plan their most ambitious initiative yet. As autumn arrived with its traditional cycle of state occasions and formal ceremonies, they proposed something that would test whether their new approach could work within the most traditional royal contexts. The autumn state visit season typically featured elaborate dinners, carefully choreographed ceremonies, and exchanges of gifts between heads of state. These events served crucial diplomatic functions and required precise adherence to centuries-old protocols. But William and Catherine wondered whether their philosophy of authentic engagement could enhance rather than replace these formal requirements. Their opportunity came with the October state visit of President Maria Santos of Costa Rica. Costa Rica's reputation for environmental leadership and social innovation made it an ideal partnership for testing whether formal diplomacy could incorporate genuine human connection. Working with the Foreign Office and Buckingham Palace protocol staff, William and Catherine proposed an unprecedented addition to the traditional state visit program. Instead of the usual formal tour of British institutions, they suggested that President Santos join them for a day of community service focused on environmental and social initiatives that reflected both countries' shared values. The proposal was diplomatically risky. State visits weren't traditionally used for hands-on activities, but President Santos enthusiastically embraced the idea. The service diplomacy day began at dawn in Richmond Park, where President Santos, William, and Catherine joined a team of conservation volunteers working to restore native habitats. The sight of two future heads of state and a current president planting trees alongside local environmental groups created powerful imagery, but, more importantly, it provided opportunities for substantive discussions about conservation policy in an informal, collaborative setting. When you're working with your hands alongside someone, the conversation becomes different, President Santos later reflected. Instead of formal exchanges of positions, you find yourself solving problems together. It's remarkable how much more productive diplomacy becomes when you're focused on a shared task. The morning's environmental work was followed by visits to community programs addressing social challenges. At a youth center in Southwark, President Santos joined William and Catherine in mentoring sessions with teenagers from disadvantaged backgrounds. The informal setting allowed for discussions about education, opportunity, and social mobility that would have been difficult to achieve in a formal diplomatic context.
The day culminated in a community dinner rather than a state banquet.
Held in the youth center they had visited earlier, the meal was prepared by local catering students and featured dishes representing both British and Costa Rican traditions. The guest list included community leaders, young people from the mentoring programs, environmental activists, and families from the neighborhoods they had worked in during the day. This is what diplomacy should feel like, President Santos told the gathering during her informal remarks. Not talking about our peoples, but talking with our peoples. Not discussing community needs in abstract terms, but working alongside the communities themselves. The success of the Costa Rica Visit Service diplomacy component attracted international attention. Diplomatic correspondents described it as a potential model for modern state engagement, while constitutional experts debated whether it represented an evolution or revolution in royal protocol. More importantly, other European royal houses began inquiring about adapting similar approaches for their own state occasions. The validation of their approach in such a formal context emboldened William and Catherine to tackle their biggest challenge yet, reimagining how the royal family approached the Christmas season. Christmas had always been the most traditional period of the royal calendar, featuring church services, gift exchanges, and family gatherings that followed patterns established over decades. The public expected certain rituals, and any deviation risked criticism for abandoning cherished traditions. But William and Catherine had noticed something during their year of community engagement. While royal Christmas traditions were beloved by many, they often felt disconnected from the challenges facing communities during what could be a difficult time of year. Homelessness increased during winter months, isolation affected vulnerable populations, and economic pressures made the season stressful for many families.
What if royal Christmas traditions could somehow address these realities while maintaining their celebratory character?
The idea that emerged would become known as Christmas in Community. Instead of celebrating Christmas solely within royal residences and traditional venues, the royal family would spend the season visiting and supporting communities across Britain, turning their Christmas activities into opportunities for service and connection.
The initiative began with the traditional Christmas card photo.
Instead of posed portraits in palace settings, the 2023 card featured William, Catherine, and their children working alongside volunteers at a London food bank, packaging Christmas hampers for families in need. The image captured both the family's closeness and their commitment to service, creating a Christmas card that was both personal and purposeful. Christmas Eve brought an innovation that touched hearts across the nation. Instead of private family celebrations, William and Catherine spent the evening visiting emergency services personnel who were working through the holidays. They brought homemade cookies, helped answer phones at emergency call centers, and shared quiet moments with police officers, firefighters, and medical staff who were spending Christmas Eve ensuring others' safety and well-being. At the London Ambulance Service headquarters, paramedic Janet Morrison was preparing for what she expected to be a routine but lonely Christmas Eve shift when William and Catherine arrived with thermos flasks of hot chocolate and an offer to help with whatever needed doing. "I've been doing this job for 15 years, Janet later recounted, and I've never had a Christmas Eve where I felt so appreciated. They didn't just visit, they rolled up their sleeves and helped. The prince spent 2 hours learning our dispatch procedures, and the princess helped restock ambulances. When they left, we all felt like we were doing something important rather than just missing Christmas with our families." Christmas Day itself featured the traditional church service at Sandringham, but with a significant addition. The royal family invited representatives from every community organization they had worked with during the year to join them for the service and the subsequent Christmas lunch. Farmers from the Hebrides sat alongside youth workers from Glasgow, while environmental activists from Richmond Park shared tables with families from Birmingham's Somali community. The Christmas lunch at Sandringham became a celebration that reflected the year's journey toward authentic engagement. Instead of formal seating arrangements based on protocol and precedents, tables were organized around shared interests and experiences. Stories were exchanged, friendships were formed, and the normally stately dining room filled with the kind of animated conversation that characterized genuinely successful parties rather than formal obligations. Boxing Day brought perhaps the most innovative element of Christmas in community. Instead of the traditional Boxing Day hunt or family activities, the royal family organized volunteer service opportunities throughout the East Anglia region. William helped serve Christmas dinner at a homeless shelter, Catherine worked with a team delivering meals to isolated elderly residents, and even the children participated in age-appropriate service activities. The sight of Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis helping to wrap presents for children in foster care provided images that captured the spirit of the entire year's transformation. These weren't photo opportunities designed to generate positive coverage, they were genuine experiences in which royal children learned about service, community responsibility, and the joy that comes from helping others. The Boxing Day service activities culminated in an evening gathering at a community center in Norwich, where all the day's volunteers came together to share food, music, and reflection on their experiences. The atmosphere was festive but meaningful, celebratory but grounded in the awareness that Christmas joy was best experienced when shared with those who might otherwise be alone. As the royal family made their way back to Sandringham that evening, they carried with them the satisfaction of having spent Christmas in a way that felt both traditional and revolutionary. They had maintained the beloved elements of royal Christmas traditions while extending their celebration to include communities that rarely experienced royal presence during the holiday season. The media coverage of Christmas in community was overwhelmingly positive, but, more significantly, it demonstrated that royal traditions could evolve without losing their essential character. The church service retained its spiritual significance, family time remained precious and protected, and the public's love for royal Christmas traditions was honored. But all of these elements were enriched by the inclusion of service and community connection. As 2023 drew to a close, William and Catherine reflected on a year that had transformed not just their approach to royal duties, but their understanding of what those duties could accomplish. They had discovered that authenticity and formality weren't opposites, they could coexist and strengthen each other. They had learned that the most profound royal traditions weren't about ceremony and protocol, but about service and connection with the people they were privileged to serve. Professor Hartwell's research had provided academic validation for what they had felt instinctively throughout the year, that the relationship between the royal family and the British people was stronger, more meaningful, and more relevant than it had been in decades. But the true measure of their success wasn't found in polling data or media coverage, it was found in the faces of the people they had worked alongside, the communities they had served, and the children who had learned that royalty at its best meant using privilege in service of others. The first working day of 2024 found William and Catherine in an unlikely location for members of the royal family, sitting in a circle of plastic chairs in the community hall of a housing estate in Tower Hamlets, listening to residents share their hopes and concerns for the year ahead. It was January 8th, and while royal tradition would typically have them reviewing official schedules and preparing for formal engagements, they had chosen instead to begin the year by asking the people they served what they most needed from their future king and queen. The New Year listening tour had been Catherine's idea, born from a conversation with her private secretary about how to build on the momentum of 2023. Traditional royal planning operated from the top down, palace officials would identify appropriate causes, coordinate with established charities, and create opportunities for royal engagement. But the most meaningful moments of the previous year had come from the bottom up, from genuine community needs and spontaneous human connections.
What if we spent the first month of 2024 just listening? Catherine had proposed.
No agenda, no predetermined initiatives.
Just going to communities and asking what they really need from us.
The Tower Hamlets session was the third stop on a tour that had already taken them to post-industrial communities in Sunderland and rural villages in Cornwall. Each gathering followed the same simple format. William and Catherine would arrive with minimal fanfare, join residents in whatever community space was available, and spend 2 hours in facilitated discussions about local challenges and opportunities. The conversations were refreshingly direct. Sarah Chen, a single mother of 3, didn't hesitate to explain the practical impact of recent policy changes on families like hers. When food prices go up and benefits don't, we're the ones who feel it first. It's all well and good to talk about economic recovery, but we need people in charge who understand what it's like to choose between heating and eating. Instead of offering polite sympathy or vague assurances about government efforts, William leaned forward with genuine interest.
What would actually help, he asked. Not what you think we want to hear, but what would make a real difference in your day-to-day life? The discussion that followed was unlike any royal engagement in recent memory.
Residents spoke candidly about housing quality, transportation costs, access to mental health services, and the challenges of finding stable employment.
William and Catherine took notes, asked follow-up questions, and admitted when they didn't understand something well enough to offer meaningful responses. 17-year-old Marcus Thompson, who was finishing his A-levels while working part-time to help support his grandmother, challenged them directly about youth opportunities. Everyone talks about giving young people chances, but most of the programs are for kids who are already doing well. What about those of us who are just trying to keep our heads above water? Catherine's response surprised him. I honestly don't know enough about the gaps in current programs to give you a good answer right now. But would you be willing to teach me? Could I spend some time understanding what you and your friends are dealing with?
That offer led to one of the most significant innovations of the listening tour, the Shadow Exchange program. Instead of brief formal visits, William and Catherine would spend entire days following community members through their normal routines, learning firsthand about the realities of life in modern Britain. Catherine's day with Marcus began at 6 a.m., when she met him at the bus stop for his journey to college. The 40-minute commute on crowded public transport, followed by a full day of classes and, then, the rush to his afternoon job at a local grocery store, gave Catherine insights into youth challenges that no briefing document could have provided. I had no idea how exhausting it was just to get through a normal day, Catherine reflected afterward. The physical tiredness, the constant financial calculations, the pressure of trying to study while helping support your family. I understood intellectually that young people face these challenges, but experiencing them even for one day was completely different. William's shadow experience with David Harrison, a former steelworker who had been seeking employment for 8 months, proved equally illuminating. A day spent visiting job centers, attending interviews, and navigating the complex benefits system gave William direct exposure to the bureaucratic obstacles that made unemployment particularly demoralizing for people eager to work. The system seems designed to make people feel like failures, William observed to Catherine that evening. David is skilled, motivated, and desperate to contribute, but every interaction he has with official services makes him feel smaller and less valuable. These shadow experiences were transformative for both William and Catherine, but they also had unexpected effects on the communities involved. Residents who had initially been skeptical about royal visitors found themselves developing genuine relationships with people they had only known as distant figures from newspaper photographs. Marcus Thompson's initial cynicism gave way to appreciation as he watched Catherine struggle to keep up with his daily routine. She actually listened, he told his grandmother afterward. And she asked real questions, not just polite ones. She wanted to understand, not just look like she cared. The listening tour culminated in an unprecedented event, a 2-day Community Solutions Summit held in a conference center in Birmingham, where representatives from every community they had visited were brought together to develop practical recommendations for royal engagement going forward. Instead of palace officials setting agendas, community leaders were asked to design programs that would actually meet their needs. The summit's working groups produced specific, actionable proposals that differed dramatically from traditional royal patronage models. Instead of formal visits and ceremonial openings, communities requested ongoing partnerships with measurable outcomes. Instead of charity fundraising events, they wanted help developing sustainable local economic opportunities. Instead of speeches about important issues, they wanted royalty to use their platforms to amplify community voices and expertise. Dr. Patricia Williams, who had coordinated community organizing efforts in Birmingham for 15 years, presented the summit's conclusions to William and Catherine with characteristic directness.
"You've spent this month learning what we need from you.
Now we need to know if you're willing to do something genuinely different with what you've learned." The answer came in the form of the Community Partnership Initiative, announced in February 2024. Instead of maintaining the traditional model of numerous brief royal visits and ceremonial engagements, William and Catherine committed to developing deep, ongoing relationships with 12 communities across Britain. Each partnership would last a minimum of 3 years, with royal involvement extending far beyond occasional visits to include sustained advocacy, resource development, and collaborative problem-solving. The initiative represented a fundamental restructuring of how royal time and influence were deployed. Instead of spreading their presence thinly across hundreds of annual engagements, William and Catherine would concentrate their efforts where they could have measurable impact. Instead of being honored guests at community events, they would become working partners in community development. The first partnership was established in Tower Hamlets, where Sarah Chan and Marcus Thompson became part of a community advisory group that would guide royal involvement in local initiatives. The partnership's initial focus was on developing wraparound support services for families facing economic instability, with William and Catherine committing to spend 1 day per month working directly with local service providers. The Hebridean fishing community became the second partner location, with a focus on sustainable economic development that honored traditional livelihoods while adapting to environmental changes. William's previous summer experience with local fishermen provided the foundation for ongoing collaboration on marine conservation and economic sustainability. Each partnership was designed around community-identified priorities rather than royal preferences or traditional charitable focuses. This meant that William and Catherine found themselves involved in initiatives ranging from affordable housing development to mental health service delivery, from youth entrepreneurship programs to elderly care innovations. The Community Partnership Initiative faced initial skepticism from royal correspondents and constitutional experts who questioned whether such intensive local involvement was appropriate for future heads of state. Traditional royal role models emphasized ceremonial presence and charitable patronage rather than hands-on community development work. But public response was overwhelmingly positive, particularly from younger generations who had previously viewed the royal family as irrelevant to their lives. Polling conducted 6 months into the initiative showed that approval ratings among 18 to 35-year-olds had reached historic highs, with respondents specifically citing the royal family's genuine usefulness as the primary factor in their support. More significantly, the partnerships began producing tangible results. The Tower Hamlets initiative successfully advocated for policy changes that improved access to emergency housing support. The Hebridean Partnership attracted development funding that created 30 new sustainable jobs in the fishing community. Similar successes were replicated across the 12 partner communities, creating a track record of royal engagement that could be measured in improved outcomes rather than just positive media coverage. As the Community Partnership Initiative matured throughout 2024, it influenced other aspects of royal work. State visits began incorporating community partnership elements, with visiting dignitaries joining William and Catherine in community service activities that showcased British civil society. Formal ceremonies were redesigned to include recognition of community leaders and volunteers rather than focusing exclusively on traditional honorees. The annual Trooping the Colours celebration was transformed into a celebration of service that honored outstanding community contributions alongside military traditions. The ceremony maintained its pageantry and constitutional significance while expanding its focus to recognize the kind of grassroots service that the Community Partnership Initiative had highlighted throughout Britain. Even the traditional royal Christmas broadcast was reimagined. Instead of a formal address from a palace setting, the 2024 Christmas message featured William and Catherine reflecting on their year in partnership with communities, with community leaders and volunteers sharing their own perspectives on service, hope, and the importance of working together toward common goals. The broadcast's most memorable moment came when Amira Hassan, the young girl whose letter had initiated Catherine's Birmingham school fair visit, appeared alongside her mother to share what they had learned about the importance of welcome and community inclusion. Watching a 10-year-old Somali refugee address the Commonwealth about hope and belonging provided a powerful symbol of how royal traditions could evolve while maintaining their essential purpose. As 2024 drew to a close, the transformation that had begun with William's simple desire to try something different had fundamentally altered the monarchy's relationship with the British people. The royal family hadn't abandoned their constitutional role or ceremonial duties, they had enhanced them by grounding them in authentic community connection. Professor Elizabeth Hartwell's follow-up research, published in December 2024, documented changes that surprised even the most optimistic observers. Community engagement with civic activities had increased by 156% in areas with royal partnerships. Charitable giving had reached record levels. Most remarkably, surveys showed that 89% of respondents now viewed the royal family as relevant to their daily lives, a dramatic shift from historical patterns. But, perhaps the most significant change was qualitative rather than quantitative. The relationship between the Crown and the people had evolved from one of distant respect to one of collaborative partnership. The royal family had proven that ancient institutions could adapt to contemporary needs without losing their essential character or constitutional importance. Standing in that same Tower Hamlets community hall where the year had begun, now decorated for a Christmas celebration organized jointly by royal staff and residents, William and Catherine reflected on a transformation that had exceeded their most ambitious hopes. They had set out to make the monarchy more relevant and authentic. In the process, they had discovered that service at its most profound level wasn't about position or ceremony, it was about relationships, commitment, and the willingness to share both struggles and joys with the people they were privileged to serve. The young girl who had invited a princess to a school fair had unknowingly initiated a revolution in royal engagement that would influence monarchy for generations to come. And, in the laughter and conversation filling that community hall, decorated with both royal emblems and children's artwork, the future of the crown looked brighter and more hopeful than anyone had dared imagine.